Hello there, and thanks for joining us on Planet America's Fireside Chat. I'm John Barron.
I'm Shaz Ciadello.
The campaign for the Republican presidential nomination hits New Hampshire after Donald Trump's big win in Iowa.
We're going to find out how Trump won and if Haley still has a shot.
And we'll also look at why so many Christian conservatives are still supporting the former president.
And I'm going to take a deep dive into America's attacks in Yemen. Are they illegal? But first...
The winner was never in doubt. Polls showed Donald Trump leading his nearest rival by about 30 points, and that's how it panned out.
Donald Trump is over that 50% threshold, which is quite an achievement. That has never been done before.
Although the polls had predicted that Nikki Haley would finish second. Maybe it was the minus 20-something degree weather or Ron DeSantis' much vaunted campaign organisation getting people out through the snow. Or maybe it was Haley's supporters' lower measures of enthusiasm. But either way, she did not meet those expectations. Yet, oddly, Nikki Haley seemed to keep the same speech that had assumed she would come second.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
Well, actual second-placed Ron DeSantis would disagree with that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was keen to say it's already down to one person, him. So much so, he was being kinda nice.
We want to thank the great people of Iowa. Thank you. We love you all. What a turnout, what a crowd. And I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world.
Who is that guy? Trump was even being magnanimous towards his rivals, you know, DeSanctimonious and Birdbrain.
I want to congratulate Ron and Nikki for having a good time together. We're all having a good time together. And I think they both actually did very well.
Well done, Ron and Nikki. It was weird to see happy Donald Trump. Obviously, Chaz, all politicians like winning a lot more than they like losing. But Trump, you know, he seems outraged when he loses, hence the denials when he loses, and he lashes out when he's under attack. But success seems to, I don't know, bring out his best self.
Honestly, that's the first time I've seen him that happy for, well, basically 8 years. He was quite happy at the Fox Town Hall as well. I thought to myself, he's a different candidate when he's happy. He should try it more often.
Maybe
anyway,
so.
Nikki Haley is continuing to pretend that DeSantis doesn't even exist. She's now campaigning as if she's the only thing standing between a Trump-Biden rematch.
The two most disliked politicians in America, Trump and Biden, both are consumed by chaos, negativity, and grievances of the past. The better choice for a better America? Nikki Haley.
I have a different style and approach. I'll fix our economy, close our border, and strengthen the cause of freedom. We need a new generation of conservative leadership to get it done. I'm Nikki Haley, and I approve this message.
As for DeSantis, he is very much embracing the underdog label. He's been saying that they've been hanging in there against all the odds. Everyone's out to get him. And look, it's true. He has been struggling for weeks. A satirist from the group The Good Liars had some fun about that a few days before the Iowa caucuses.
Nothing's gonna stop us.
Real quick, before we get started, thank you everyone. Governor DeSantis, I want to present to you this participation trophy. Now, probably not gonna win the election, right? But we're proud of you for trying. There you go.
Sorry, buddy. Sorry.
He's special, he's unique, and he's our little snowflake. Thank you. Here you go. If you want.
What kind of a person would pull a stunt like that?
Throw them in jail.
So
There's
disrespectful.
no room for that kind of thing in this society, John.
No, exactly.
Look, what have we learned? Well, the first thing that we've learned is that Haley and DeSantis' strategy didn't work. Trump's super PAC spent $32 million in ads bagging out his opponents. Haley and DeSantis spent $38 million bagging out each other, but combined, they only spent $1 million targeting the runaway winner, Trump. And part of the problem is that Trump is also aided by a never-ending stream of earned media he gets from cable news as well. This is an estimate of the total earned media value throughout the campaign for DeSantis, Haley, and Ramaswamy, and there is Trump, dwarfing them in orange. You can see those spikes that the other three candidates got. They were during debates. And look how Trump still got more media than them, even on those days. It's a real vindication of Trump skipping the debates.
Yeah, and counter-programming with events of his own where he was centre stage.
Totally. Another thing that we learnt, the weather might have in the end affected the results. Turnout was only 110,000 voters compared to 187,000 voters back in 2016. Now, some have suggested it shows a demotivated electorate. Election analyst Harry Enton disagreed. He noted the coldest wind chill since 1980 was about 14 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 10 degrees Celsius. That was back in 1988. The wind chill forecasted on Monday was minus 28 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 33 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Celsius cooler. And that probably hurt Nikki Haley, I reckon, at the very least. She doesn't have the same kind of committed supporters that Trump does. Yep. DeSantis had the ground game helping him out. Might hurt Trump as well because he's got uncommitted supporters as well. Interesting entrance polls as well. We learned a lot from them. Firstly, gender gap. What gender gap? Trump actually won more women than he won men.
Wow.
53% to 49%. Nikki Haley did basically the same between women and men as well. No advantage to her in the gender gap. White evangelicals were interesting. Trump did pretty much the same between evangelicals and non-evangelicals. It was DeSantis who did much better amongst evangelicals, and Haley did much worse amongst evangelicals. So that reinforces the idea that Iowa was DeSantis' best and only shot. That's where the evangelicals are.
And those evangelical endorsements and the governor's endorsement may have helped around the edges.
Yeah. Here's some evidence that no one was ever going to beat Trump, though. From the entrance polls again, amongst those who made up their mind more than a month ago, that's 65% of the Iowa caucus voters, Trump won 66% of those voters. So he had a huge built-in advantage that people weren't going to overcome. Finally, the entrance polls made very clear that Nikki Haley's base are not Republicans. She won 34% of non-Republicans compared to 15% of Republicans. And that's why she's expected to do much better in New Hampshire, where independents dominate the primary. And that's also why Trump can be expected to do better everywhere else than New Hampshire. These Haley-curious independents are pointing, though, to a real weakness for Trump in the general election, should he win the nomination. 57% of independents in the Washington Post poll said Trump is being treated fairly by the legal system. That's 57% of independents who do not believe that Trump's trials are rigged or there's electoral interference. That might be why, in the entrance polls in Iowa, 31% of Republican Iowa caucus voters said if Trump's convicted, they would not consider him fit to be president. 49% of those voters supported Nikki Haley. So we can see that given all that, Trump supporters have changed from 2016. Back in 2016, he was seen as a moderate. He was supported much more by independents than by conservative Republicans. Now it's the opposite. He's the very definition of conservatism in America, and there's conservatives who support him, not independents. So, John, this is not going to be 2016 all over again. Everything is different.
Yep, Trump has changed everything, but that figure, 31% of Republicans saying Trump would be unfit if he's convicted rather than just charged, well, that could be the ball game right there. If Trump loses in November, that could well be why. Perhaps the biggest surprise of caucus night was just how early the Associated Press and the news networks called the race. Here's Fox News at 7:32 p.m, 32 minutes after the caucuses were due to start. They didn't all start on time. People were still taking off their big overcoats because of all the snow. Just 1% of votes have been counted at this point. Most votes had not, in fact, even been cast yet.
So based on the first results and our Fox News voter analysis, the Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses.
He will take the lion's share of the state's 40 delegates. This result really solidifies his place as the current frontrunner for the nomination.
Now, Chaz, all of those projections, of course, were largely based on those entry polls that you're talking about that basically confirmed what the opinion polls have been saying for months, that Trump was a mile in front. Only a handful of small precincts had finished voting at that point. Most were still hearing the speeches in favour of the various candidates when suddenly people are getting alerts on their mobile phones saying Trump declared winner of the Iowa caucuses. It's like, well, honey, do we go home now or do we stay in here where it's warm? Either way, Ron DeSantis said that call from the networks as the process was getting underway amounted to election interference.
The media was against us. They were writing our obituary months ago. They even called the election before people even got a chance to vote.
Of course, it's hard to say. We will never know what, if any, impact that had. If you were a Trump supporter in a caucus and you'd seen that Trump had won, would you now say, let's go and get some dinner, let's not wait until the voting is done? If you're a DeSantis supporter, would you be dispirited? If you're a Haley supporter? I mean, if you've gone to caucus, you're probably just going to stay to the bitter end anyway, aren't you?
Yeah, it's 30 degrees, minus 30 degrees outside. They're staying inside. I don't think it would affect the vote, but I do think it's incredibly disrespectful of both voters and democracy in general.
Yeah, it was kind of a spoiler for the whole event. It was just like, come on, at least stretch it out till you've counted the votes.
And also, for very little benefit, no one was surprised to hear Trump won Iowa. They weren't getting anything from calling it early, so what's the point? Anyway, while we're talking about the media, you're the journalist amongst the two of us, so I want to ask you a question. We saw CNN cut away early from Trump's victory speech. But more than that, we saw MSNBC not cover 1 second of Trump's victory speech. I want to play you the reason Rachel Maddow gave for that.
Projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will keep an eye on that as it happens. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech, if there's anything noteworthy, something substantive and important. The reason I'm saying this is, of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish. It is a decision that we regularly revisit. And honestly, earnestly, it is not an easy decision, but there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things.
Now, I get that news networks have paid huge fines for broadcasting lies from Donald Trump quite recently, and he does lie a lot. I get all that. But isn't this their job to cover the news? And he's not going to be lying much in the first 5 minutes of his speech when he's thanking people. And if he said something they don't like, they can criticise it afterwards. And this is MSNBC. Who's he going to convince anyway? It seems to me that they're just not doing their job if they don't show at least some of his speech. It just seems petty and just negligence.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, look, being the journalist on the program, I'm also cynical about this, and I tend to think, they can grapple with these journalistic questions, but the bottom line is probably MSNBC knows their viewers do not want to see 23 minutes of Donald Trump, so they justify not broadcasting 23 minutes of Donald Trump. As to whether it is justified journalistically, I think you could well say in 2021 or 2022 or even 2023, when Donald Trump is either an ex-president lying about an election that he says was stolen that was not, or a candidate who we don't know how well they're going to do. No, maybe we don't carry their potential untruths unfiltered live to air. Maybe we fact-check them, maybe we put context around them. In 2024, when he is the overwhelming front-runner, not just likely to be the Republican nominee, almost unstoppable to be the Republican nominee, and flip of the coin, 50-50, he's going to be president by the end of January next year again. Can you decide arbitrarily, based on our suspicion that he could lie again, that we're not going to broadcast him live, a news event such as the winner of the Iowa caucuses? Personally, I don't think you can do that. But as a former fact checker, I know it is really important not to give people your airtime for free and without accountability. So I think you just have to have the people on the panel who can say, well, that was incorrect, but that was interesting as well. Now, while historically Iowa has a pretty patchy record picking president, one thing it usually does is win over the field. And so is the case this year, with fourth-placed Vivek Ramaswamy ending his campaign on caucus night. Then he made this announcement.
Earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulated him on his victory. And now going forward, he will have my full endorsement for the presidency. And I think we're going to do the right thing for this country.
Also bowing out after attracting just 191 votes in Iowa, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. Along with Chris Christie, Hutchinson was the only candidate prepared to openly criticise Donald Trump. He qualified for the first debate back in August, but didn't meet the poll or donor thresholds for subsequent debates, so Asa pretty much vanished from sight at that point. So, time to dust off the old board game chairs. Guess who's not going to be president? Let's say adieu to Vivek Ramaswamy. We'll no doubt be hearing a lot more from him in the future, whether we want to or not. And farewell as well to Asa Hutchinson. We've forgotten him already, I would say. Now, while Asa Hutchinson's asterisks in the polls in New Hampshire are not going to help anybody, Ramaswamy was getting 5%, and that could potentially make the difference between Trump or Haley winning in the Granite State next week. A poll taken the day after the Iowa caucuses in New Hampshire showed Trump registering 52% support, followed by Haley on 38%, DeSantis back on 6%. Compare that to the same St Anselm poll a week earlier, and it included Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy as well, by the way. Trump and Haley are both up 7 points. DeSantis is standing still. So there's no doubt Nikki Haley Chaz is going to come second next week, but there's plenty of doubt that she can actually win.
Yeah, look, I mean, Donald Trump had some advantages in Iowa, no doubt about that. But honestly, he smashed it so badly. He won 98 of 99 counties. The one he only lost by 1 vote.
Wow.
He spent pretty much no money there compared to anyone else.
He hardly campaigned there, a few rallies.
He barely turned up, exactly, and he still just annihilated them. Now, Nikki Haley has advantages in New Hampshire, that is true, but man, she's going to need them. He is so far ahead at this point in time. 14 points is a lot to catch up in 1 week without a debate and without any other reason why she should catch up. So, yeah, she's got the job ahead of her. If she wins in New Hampshire, she will have earned it.
Yeah, well, it was following the Iowa caucuses that Nikki Haley announced that she would not take part in those 2 scheduled debates in New Hampshire prior to the primary unless Donald Trump committed to appear, which he hasn't done so far and he's not going to do now. Haley's statement saying that we've had 5 great debates in this campaign. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has ducked all of them. He has nowhere left to hide. The next debate I do will either be with Donald Trump or with Joe Biden. I look forward to it. Well, Ron DeSantis hit out at her on ex-Twitter saying Nikki Haley is afraid to debate because she doesn't want to answer the tough questions. The reality is that she is not running for the nomination. She's running to be Trump's VP. DeSantis also said that he was prepared to debate 2 empty podiums. Not surprisingly, perhaps, organisers of the debate said, thank you, Ron, but no. They called off the debates instead of seeing that.
Yeah, look, this is all just part of Nikki Haley's strategy I detailed before, which is to pretend Ron DeSantis doesn't exist and to say, I'm the only person who stands between you and a Biden-Trump rematch. She knows that 70 to 80% of people don't want that rematch and will do anything to stop that. So it's an interesting strategy. Whether it works, we'll find out in a few days' time.
We sure will. She has just turned down, though, 3 hours on a statewide telecast debate stage where she could have made all of her points to try and win New Hampshire. Instead, she said, no, I'm not going to do it. That's a gutsy call, I would say. But for more, we're joined by one of the most respected Republican political operatives in the state of New Hampshire, Jim Merrill. He ran the Granite State campaigns of Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio, as well as working back in the day for George W. Bush. And Jim joins us from Manchester, New Hampshire. Jim, thank you for being with us on Planet America's Fireside Chat.
No, it's my pleasure being with you. Thanks for having me.
So, Jim, how would you sum up the differences between New Hampshire and Iowa? The kinds of people who tend to live there and the kinds of presidential candidates they tend to support?
Big differences, in fact. I mean, Iowa has a caucus system, which really is about organization and organizing in precincts, really focused on very committed party activists. So typically turnout is lesser in that process, but, folks who are more intense about being involved. And so the premium there is really on candidates' organizational skills. Iowa is more conservative socially. There's a prominent evangelical population in Iowa. New Hampshire is one of the least religious states in the country. So the evangelical population here is far smaller, not as participatory in the process. If you can go back in time, former Senator Rick Santorum, former Governor Mike Huckabee, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, all of them did very well in Iowa, part because of, they had a faith-based background, more socially conservative persona. But in New Hampshire, they didn't do well. They were not received as favorably here. So typically, we've not seen someone win both Iowa and New Hampshire in the same cycle. It's unusual. And so, we'll see what happens here next Tuesday, but those are some of the differentiations here.
Now, Jim, in the past, there have been some big changes in candidates' fortunes between Iowa and New Hampshire, but usually there's a debate happening then to push that volatility along. This time, no debate. So do you think there are going to be any opportunities for Nikki Haley to potentially gain 15 points?
Certainly tougher. Yeah, you're certainly right in that debates in the past have been a catalytic event where campaigns can either slingshot and get energy from or be damaged by. And so without that debate this time, it limits the ability to engage. And so it's really going to be incumbent on the Haley campaign to aggressively court the state over the next 6 days, to cover it corner to corner, and to work day and night to earn votes and to get her message out there as an alternative to Trump. But you're certainly right in that missing out on that. There was a calculated risk on their part. I think she's probably right in that at this point, people would like to see Donald Trump debate. Trump has declined to do so, and he's been in a position where he can do that because of the strength of his ballot position. But nonetheless, some see it as a missed opportunity. But if any of you watched the debate, and I use that term loosely, between Haley and DeSantis last week, we're not missing much. That was kind of ugly, and I suspect it would be more of the same if we saw it again here.
Jim, George Bush famously talked back in 1980 about having the big momentum coming out of Iowa that year into New Hampshire. Does Nikki Haley have any momentum coming third in Iowa, or Trump winning by 30 points? Does that give him the momentum?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the Haley momentum has been over a period of months, actually. She made an early commitment to New Hampshire that's paid off. She spent a lot of time here. She did a lot of great town hall meetings, which is kind of a hallmark of the way we campaign here. And I think that was rewarded in giving her a fairly strong base of support coming out of the summer into the fall. Then she had some good debate performances. Then she got Governor Sununu's endorsement in December. And so there's been this slow but steady climb for her coming into this final week of the primary. Now, to your point about Trump, that was a great night for him in Iowa the other night. There's no question about it. I don't know that it gives him momentum coming into New Hampshire, but it certainly solidifies his position. And I think what it does, it contributes to the sense of inevitability, that it's going to be inevitable that Trump becomes the nominee. And so I think for Haley, it's really important for her to do very well here. I'm not going to say she has to win, but she certainly wants to either win, obviously, or be a very strong second. So there's no misunderstanding that coming out of New Hampshire, it is in fact a two-person race. So I think she's in striking distance here. I think she has an opportunity, and it's up to her to really double down and earn it here over the next 5-6 days.
We saw a poor turnout in Iowa, the worst turnout for more than a decade. Now, obviously, bad weather was involved there. But do you have any sense of what you expect turnout to be like in New Hampshire next week? And if it's a big turnout, who do you think that would help?
So turnout in New Hampshire is going to be much more significant than it was in Iowa, just because in part of the nature of our process. It's more open, it's more accessible. You're not asking people to go stand in a high school gym on a 15-degree night for 3 or 4 hours. You're asking people to exercise their right to go vote on Election Day and go in the polling place and cast their ballot. And so I think you'll have 300,000 or 400,000 people casting ballots next week out of a voting population of 700,000 or 800,000. That's fairly significant. And and who that helps? I mean, look, I think the Haley theory of the case here is if Trump has more Republicans locked up, the goal is to get the undeclared voters to show up and to cast a ballot for Haley. Undeclareds are neither Republicans nor Democrats. They could be conservative, they could be moderate. And typically they go to where the action is. So this cycle, there's really very little happening on the Democratic side. So it's on the Republican side where the action is. So I do expect undeclared voters to significantly turn out to take Republican ballots next Tuesday.
How formidable would you say Trump's operation is in New Hampshire? Would you say it's better than Nikki Haley's?
I don't know if I have the data to kind of assess the one organization versus the other, but let me talk about the Trump organization for a second. Trump won in 2016 really by the seat of his pants. The campaign was not well organized. There was a lot of shuffling around, a lot of questions about who was in charge and what the plan was, and they won on the strength of message, certainly not an organization. They captured a movement. The Trump campaign of today is battle-tested, smart, tough. He smartly went out and he found people who know how to run national campaigns, who know how to do grassroots, who know how to assemble data and make it work for them. And so certainly, he's benefited from that. He benefited from that in Iowa. He's benefiting from that in New Hampshire. Now, Nikki Haley's team aside, she does have the AFP organization with her, which is helping her. But what the Trump campaign has, in addition to just like that, I think that learned experience of having a stronger team helping them this time around, is they have activists that just their intensity of support is like none I've ever seen. And to have that kind of volunteer pool at your fingertips is awfully helpful to helping them get their message out.
Jim Merrill, thanks for joining Planet America's Fireside Chat all the way from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Hey, it's great being with you. Thanks for having me, guys.
On the eve of the Iowa caucuses, Florida Senator Marco Rubio endorsed Donald Trump for president. It was a blow for Nikki Haley, who'd endorsed Rubio over Trump in 2016, and a definite snub as well for Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, too. It was particularly notable given the bitter battle that Rubio fought to try and stop Trump in 2016, and a sign that this time the Republican Party establishment seems resigned to another Trump nomination.
Mr. Rubio of Florida.
A decade ago, Marco Rubio looked like the future of conservatism in America. The son of Cuban immigrants was given a coveted spot at the 2012 Republican convention, introducing their nominee, Mitt Romney.
My dad used to tell us, en este país, ustedes van a poder lograr todas las cosas que nosotros no pudimos. In this country, you're going to be able to accomplish all the things we never could.
The Republican Party's autopsy report following Romney's loss to President Barack Obama urged outreach to Hispanic voters and described the then 42-year-old Marco Rubio as a, quote, leader and an outstanding candidate. Rubio was given another primetime slot the following year, delivering the Republican State of the Union reply, but that performance suggested maybe Marco wasn't quite ready for the spotlight.
In the short time that I've been here in Washington, nothing has frustrated me more than false choices like the one the president laid out tonight.
As the 2016 Republican primary campaign got underway, Marco Rubio jumped into the race. But the big question at that point seemed to be whether anyone could stop Jeb Bush, who made much of being married to a Mexican-American.
I will run with heart.
In English
Trabajen con nosotros.
And Espanol, Governor Jeb Bush now officially in the race.
And I will run to win.
The former Florida governor, brother to one president, son of another, had the pedigree, the name recognition, and the fundraising to be a formidable candidate. Jeb had everything except what it takes.
I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Oh dear. Trump overtook Bush in national polls in late July 2015, a month after entering the race, despite or because of comments like this.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Trump said and did pretty much everything that 2012 autopsy report had said a candidate should not say or do.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Yet, apart from a few days that November when Ben Carson briefly took the lead, Trump stayed in front, turning debates into roasts, mocking his rivals.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is principled. You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
And as Bush faded, establishment Republicans started shopping around. Many turned to their great hope for the future, Marco Rubio, who'd already showed he was prepared to fight back.
Guys, we have a con artist as the front runner in the Republican Party.
And the Florida senator tried to beat Trump at his own game.
Then he asked for a full-length mirror. I don't know why, because the podium goes up to here, but he wanted a full-length mirror. Maybe to make sure his pants weren't wet. I don't know. Then...
The Iowa caucuses of 2016 proved Trump could be beaten. Ted Cruz finished on top. Rubio almost beat Trump for second place, and he loomed as a major threat heading into New Hampshire's first-in-the-nation primary.
After his third-place finish in Iowa, Marco Rubio rocketed into New Hampshire with what his supporters dubbed Marco-mentum and vaulting into second place in a lot of the polls.
No one else in this race can unite the conservative movement and the Republican Party faster than I can.
Some polls were putting Rubio second only to Trump in New Hampshire. But the Marco-mentum hit a big roadblock with a repetitive robotic debate performance.
And let's dispel once and for all with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows what he is doing.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie decided it was time to call Rubio out and take him down. It was brutal.
There it is. He knows exactly what he's doing.
The memorized 25-second speech. Marco, the thing is this. When you're president of the United States, when you're a governor of a state, the memorized 30-second speech where you talk about how great America is at the end of it doesn't solve one problem for one person.
Christie's own campaign was going nowhere, but he was a deadly character assassin, dubbing Rubio the boy in the bubble.
We know who the boy in the bubble is up here, who never answers your questions, who's constantly scripted and controlled because he can't answer your questions.
And New Hampshire's voters suddenly had their doubts about Rubio's readiness too.
Donald Trump has 34%, John Kasich has 16%, and Ted Cruz in third with 12%. Now, Jeb Bush is in fourth with 11%, slightly ahead of Marco Rubio in fifth with 11% as well.
Fifth place behind Bush was a disaster for Marco Rubio. Christie soon dropped out and endorsed Trump in the forlorn hope of being picked as his vice president. Trump, meanwhile, was still reminding people about Marco's water bottle.
Do you remember that catastrophe? And he's like this, and we were, I need water, help me, I need water, help.
Rubio ended his campaign after a humiliating loss in his home state of Florida as Trump sailed to the Republican nomination in 2016. Rubio grudgingly endorsed him over Hillary Clinton in the presidential election, and while Chris Christie ultimately turned against Trump, Marco Rubio, once the great hope of the Republican Party establishment, has towed the Trump line ever since. I don't know about you, Chaz, but for me, one of the enduring mysteries of Donald Trump's political appeal in the United States is his popularity with self-identified Christian conservatives and evangelicals. This divorced adulterer, sexual predator, fraudster, liar, COVID denier, deemed to be unfit to be president by his closest advisors, and yet they still love him. How is he the top choice of so many people of genuine faith? Trump was confirmed into the Presbyterian Church as a child, but has reportedly never been a regular churchgoer. So, do they actually believe he's a believer? Here's part of a video called God Made Trump, shared by Trump on his Truth social media.
And on June 14th, 1946, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God gave us Trump. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, fix this country, work all day, fight the Marxists, eat supper, then go to the Oval Office and stay past midnight at a meeting of the heads of state. So God made Trump.
Now, that voice, by the way, Chaz, is well known to any American over a certain age. Conservative broadcaster Paul Harvey, who actually died 15 years ago. The producers of this video have used artificial intelligence to adapt a recording of a speech that Harvey made back in the 1970s, which was called So God Made a Farmer.
I need somebody with arms, strong enough to rustle the deep state, and yet gentle enough to deliver his own grandchild. Somebody to ruffle the feathers, tame cantankerous World Economic Forum, come home hungry, have to wait until the First Lady is done with lunch with friends, then tell the ladies to be sure and come back real soon, and mean it. So God gave us Trump.
Now, that stumble from Melania after she'd allegedly been at a long lunch with the girls might make you be thinking right now this is actually some kind of parody and over-the-top satire, but it is not, Chaz. And Pastor Joseph Brown of Washington, Iowa, is among those who say this whole thing is very concerning. He takes particular exception to the fact that this video uses biblical quotes which were about God to now describe Donald Trump.
And look, we get asked about this all the time. This definitely confuses a lot of viewers, why religious people are so into an unreligious person like Trump. Look, I think there are two complicating factors that we should consider. One, evangelical isn't just a religion, it's also an identity. Some people who have the identity of evangelical aren't very religious. Take the guy who actually made that clip we played, Brendan Dilley. He describes himself as a Christian and as a man of faith, but he says he has never read the Bible and doesn't attend church. He also says Trump has, quote, God-tier genetics. So that's one potential evangelical for you right there. He's not exactly Ned Flanders, is he? The other complication is that there's a two-way flow between Trumpism and evangelicals. According to Pew, out of white people who did not identify as evangelicals in 2016, but did support Trump, 16% of them began describing themselves as evangelicals by 2020. But only 1% of white people who didn't support Trump in 2016 did the same thing. So Trump's relationship with evangelicals is complicated. They're kind of intertwined.
Yes, maybe they're evangelising Trump rather than God at this point. Well, joining us for more is Professor Anthea Butler. She's Chair of Religious Studies at the University of Pennsylvania and author of the book White Evangelical Racism. Professor, welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat.
Thanks. Nice to talk to you.
So, Professor, we're just taking a look at some of those social media memes of God made Trump. Do Christian conservatives look at that and take it literally? Do they really believe that?
Well, people who follow Trump take it literally because they do believe he's been sent by God. This is a thing that happened since 2016, since the first election of Donald Trump. There have been lots of pictures I'm sure you've seen with Jesus standing behind him in the Oval Office or him in some kind of, deified position. Now you see a lot of pictures with him on the cross, which is really interesting. So I'm not surprised about this.
Now, Professor, I don't know a lot about religion, but I know you're not supposed to worship false idols. So why don't evangelicals see videos like the God Made Trump one and say that's creating a false idol?
I think they think of them more as fan fiction, actually, and maybe not even fiction. I think for a lot of people, this idea about making Trump, more muscular than he really is, more godlike than he is a way in which they can support their beliefs about who they think he is, first of all, and secondarily, fight back some of the obvious things about Trump that maybe they don't want to see. And I think, the other part of it is something simple, but also something very sad. They don't understand their own Christian theology. And in that case, Donald Trump has become a godlike figure, but is also an idol.
And how do you explain this apparent disconnect between this belief that God made Trump and yet Donald Trump's apparent lack of religiosity himself? He doesn't go to church. He hardly even pretends to be a man of faith anymore.
No, he's not. And I mean, that's one of the more interesting things to me personally, is that his followers don't seem to think that he needs to be. There was a time for evangelicals in the 80s and the 90s, and even the early 2000s, where they wanted their political figures to seem very religious. They wanted their political figures to be pious. They wanted them to be, happily married and not adulterers. They wanted lots of things that would have been morally upright. But now they don't require this from Donald Trump. And I think part of the reason why is a history. And that the history, when they've had people like this, they haven't gotten everything they wanted. And the thing that I would like to say about Donald Trump is that, say what you will about him, but he gave evangelicals what they wanted. He gave them, judges. He gave them 3 Supreme Court judges. He gave them favor. He invited them to the White House. He treated them well. And so for them, they believe that he's their best and last and only hope.
So, Anthea Butler, when we look at the rhetoric that Trump was using in Iowa and what he was sent by God to do in the state, he was talking a lot about big city crime, not an issue in largely white, largely rural Iowa. He was talking about securing the southern border. Again, Iowa's in the upper Midwest. So was he appealing to religion or was he appealing to racism?
Yes, and it is appealed to several things, and they hit on religious themes, actually. So one way this is about fear. It is about the fear of, look at those things, the immoral cities, the people coming over the border, they're going to attack you and take you out of your nice homes. And so that makes people afraid. And a lot of evangelicalism is about fear. So that's the first thing. Secondarily, the other thing about evangelicals is they like to feel protected. They like to feel that God is going to protect them. And so what Trump is selling is, here are these things that are fearful, but if I get into office, I will take care of you. I will protect you. I'll be daddy, right? And so this kind of patriarchal sense within evangelicalism is very important. And so for them, Donald Trump is not only a president, but he's a protector.
It seems that church attendance is becoming less frequent and less common in America. So are the evangelicals who support Trump maybe not so much the religiously observant ones? Are they maybe more part of evangelical culture rather than being super religious, as it were?
What's really happening here? I think it's a combination of two things. One is the fact that when we say evangelicals, a lot of people identify as evangelical even though they don't go to church. And that's something that happened in 2020, okay? So that's a first thing. The second thing is that evangelicals are not just, straight line, reform thinkers. You can think about Pentecostals and charismatics and non-denominational people. And so they all get lumped together. And the way that we see this and the way that the polls are looking, where it says all these evangelicals came out for Trump, people have to self-identify as evangelical. They're not identifying based on theology or anything else. They're identifying that way. And I think that for many people, evangelical is also equal to Republican. And so they code themselves as evangelical because they have Republican beliefs.
Bottom line, if you look at the Iowa entrance polls, Trump performed pretty much exactly the same amongst evangelicals as he did amongst non-evangelicals. So should we stop focusing on religion in Trumpism and just call them Republicans?
Well, I think we have to focus it the other way around. We need to focus on Republicans as being, evangelical religious people. I wrote a piece back in 2014 where I said the Republican Party was becoming a religion, and it operates like a religion. It has, strict edicts. It goes a lot about morality, and the morality, as I say in my book, White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America, evangelicals use morality as a shield to hide their desire for power. And so what you have to understand about these folks is that it's not simply about a religious belief. They want the religious belief and the political power. And so if you have political power, then you can do all the things that are also happening in America right now, like, saying abortion is banned in certain places and states. You can ban books. You can say you're not teaching certain things about America. You can start to do a lot of things that point to a theocracy. And I think this is what is happening in this 2024 election cycle, which I think people really need to pay attention to. You can't throw out religion from this election. It is going to be a very integral part of how people are voting or how people are not voting for Trump, and also about whether or not the Republicans will be able to remain in power in the House and, maybe get back to the Senate, maybe. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Professor Anthea Butler, thanks for having a fireside chat with us.
Thank you so much.
Now let's take a sharp turn to the Middle East. The Houthis are an Iranian-backed militia in Yemen who this week were relisted as a terrorist organisation by the Biden administration in response to a whole spate of attacks on international shipping. You see, when a ship travels from Europe to Asia, it usually travels through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, right past Yemen, to get to the Indian Ocean. The only other alternative is to go around Africa, which takes an extra week and costs a lot more. Now, for the past month, the Houthis have been using drones and missiles to attack ships that they say are Israeli or heading to or from Israel, but in reality, they're attacking all kinds of ships that have nothing to do with Israel, but they're simply passing by Yemen. As a result of this, many ships have opted to travel around Africa instead, increasing shipping costs by 173% and creating huge supply chain issues. Now, this placed Biden in a tough position because he knew that a number of young progressive Americans sympathise with the Houthis. They see them as protesters against Israel's war in Gaza. But at the same time, the Houthis were taking hostages. They were at a minimum greatly impacting world trade, and they could possibly have led to a serious escalation in the Middle East. So Biden and Antony Blinken put out a series of ineffective sounding warnings like this one. We call for the immediate end of these illegal attacks and release of unlawfully detained vessels and crews. The Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should they continue to threaten lives, the global economy, and the free flow of commerce. Well, that didn't do much. And after the Houthis' 26th attack, the US sought a UN Security Council resolution, which they got. The resolution demanded that the Houthis immediately end attacks on ships in the Red Sea, and it implicitly endorsed the American-led task force that had been defending those vessels. Then, the next day after attack number 27, America responded in a different way, with 150 missiles, taking out munitions depots, launching systems, radar systems and more. They did give the Houthis, though, a few hours' notice to give them the chance to get people out of harm's way. Also gave them the chance to get their mobile equipment out of harm's way. But about 20 to 30% of Houthis' offensive capacity was still destroyed, according to the US military, and at least 5 people were killed, according to the Houthis. Some progressives were angered by those airstrikes for moral reasons, but a number of Congress people on both sides of the political divide raised an entirely different question. That question being, is it a legal attack? As Democrat Ro Khanna put it, the president needs to come to Congress before launching a strike against the Houthis and involving us in another Middle East conflict. And the president can only introduce the US into hostilities after congressional authorization or in a national emergency when the US is under imminent attack. By contrast, he said this attack was a retaliatory offensive strike. So, is it self-defense or is it an offensive strike? I asked law professor at George Mason University, Ilya Somin, his view.
So the Constitution gives to Congress, not the president, the power to declare war. So if the US government wanted to start a conflict with another nation or even an armed non-national group, perhaps they would need to get congressional authorization. On the other hand, if the conflict is started by the enemy, then the president could order US forces to defend. And that is pretty much what has happened here. The Houthis have been firing missiles to a large extent indiscriminately against shipping in the Red Sea, but including in some cases, they've been launching attacks on US ships as well. And I think that gives the president the power to order defensive action to protect the US shipping, and some of that defensive action can be tactically offensive, as in this case, for instance, bombing or using missiles to attack the facilities from which the Houthis launched their missiles.
So if America is easily swatting away cheap drones, does a 150 missile attack on Yemen count as self-defense?
I think the president has a good deal of discretion. In particular, while so far the Houthis haven't been able to do much damage to U.S. and other shipping, they continue to launch attacks. There's always a chance that they will successfully break through sooner or later. In fact, it may be almost inevitably that if allowed to attack unimpeded, they would. And the scale of effort that is justifiable as self-defense surely depends on what it's necessary to get the Houthis to stop. And so far, at least as of the time that we're saying this, the effort so far has not been enough to stop the attack.
Even if this does count as self-defense, though, Biden took his sweet time responding to Yemen. He waited until the 27th strike. So does it matter that he had plenty of time to go to Congress if he'd wanted to, but he chose not to?
So that takes away a pragmatic argument against going to Congress, the idea that he had to act quickly, but it doesn't necessarily make it legally required so long as it is in fact an action in defense against an attack, as opposed to, say, what President Obama did in 2011 when he initiated war with Libya, and there had not been an attack on the United States or on U.S. forces. So as a pragmatic matter, I think there may well be good reason for Biden to go to Congress, particularly since at some point we may well run into the 90-day War Powers Act deadline. But so far, I think, unlike in the Libya case and perhaps some other cases, so far, I think he is not yet legally required to go to Congress.
And we go into so much more detail about all those questions in the full interview, which you can find on our Facebook page.
In fact, there you'll find longer versions of all of our interviews. But for now, that's it for a Fireside Chat. The fallout from the New Hampshire primary next week.
And the Pet Podcast is back in action in all the usual pod places right there. We'll see you back here at the same time next week or anytime on iView, YouTube or Facebook.
Bye-bye.